Hey everybody, this is Brendan, and yeah, I'm making a video again, which is something I have not done in a while, and is the plan is to make that the beginning of me restarting a bunch of things I haven't done in a while, and it's been kind of a long year and a half for reasons that you can guess, and that we're all kind of sick of talking about at this point. And I'm looking to kind of get some things going again after the trials of that last year and a half or so. And one of those things is starting to make some more videos, and another one of those things is starting to go to some conventions. And part of the reason that I was just at Inconjunction 2021 just for this past weekend, and I'm going to be talking about that here partially just because lots of the videos that I've done before, usually I've just kind of focused in on things that's like, all right, I feel like I know how to do this for sure. This is just like rock solid advice that I could stand on. Whereas this is definitely more something that I'm learning about and still getting a handle of. So yeah, so I'm just kind of making this in the hopes that that process and me talking about that might be kind of interesting. So this past weekend, and I'm just gonna have this little con book. I'm gonna make it dance and sing. Bada boom, bada boom. I was at Inconjunction 2021 in Indianapolis. Inconjunction is really just an adorable little convention. It's this nicest little thing. It's been around for about 40 years. So it's been actually was around long enough that even before Gen Con and some of the big, more commercial conventions sort of came along, they just became these giant world crushing things. In Indianapolis, it used to be the main sort of center of like nerd and SFF interest, Indianapolis area. And now that those things have come along and Gen Con is a bigger deal, it's sort of part of the same kind of general subculture as Capricorn and especially WindyCon, of where it's like it's a volunteer, it's fan run, it's been around for a long time. Many of the people that come there have been coming there for a very long time, and it feels it feels like very much a part of that subculture, and it feels like a subculture unto itself. And it's a subculture that I always that I kind of like and think is always sort of really interesting. And sometimes that subculture likes me back, and sometimes it doesn't. But anyway, I was happy to be there. And well, I was happy to be there, and I wasn't happy to be. It's been an interesting weekend because in conjunction for me, just this past little bit of time, like in a word, wonderful. I had a great time, and I can't help but say, yeah, that I did have a great time in spite of everything. In two words, it's sort of wonderful and terrible because the main reason that I went to conjunction was to try to sell books, and books really did not get sold. I ended up taking a bath financially on the whole thing. And yet I still don't feel too bad about it. For some reason, I'm just still really happy with how I spent the weekend, even as I sort of, add the things up and figure out, okay, how am I gonna, what does this mean for the long-term implications of what's going on? Um, and maybe just to explain that feeling, okay, so if we flash back to, again, about a year and a half ago, right when COVID, literally as COVID hit, basically, or a little bit before that, or even actually maybe like a couple of years earlier than that, when I first kind of decided, all right, I wanted to make writing a little bit more part of my professional life and not just, one of the things I just spend all this time on. Really, when I was in my throwing everything against the wall and kind of seeing what sticks phase, I guess I'm still in that phase, but at my more intensively sort of doing that, I did try selling books at a bunch of conventions just to see, okay, great, what's going to happen, and try participating in conventions in other ways and just sort of attending them for the first time and making a point of getting to all of them. And generally, the impression I had, it wasn't just that, as far as just a making money kind of a proposition, it definitely didn't work real well. Um, and it wasn't just that I didn't see it working really well for me, it's that looking around to other people, not only did I was I pretty I could see other people not really making all that much money. And the people that I could see making money were clearly devoting so much time to it that the cost benefit I didn't think quite made sense to me. And even more, you had people that were saying that there were lots of money and doing clearly well when I was just sort of sitting at the table two doors down from them, where it's just sort of like, okay, I'm keeping track of what you're doing. You're not making as much money as you're saying you are, which really kind of made me skeptical of the whole enterprise. So ultimately, what I decided just to do with the selling books at conventions and comic cons and fairs and stuff like that was to just stick with doing um, was to just was to just stick with making it local, right? And to excuse me, and just sort of attending the ones that I could hit recently, where I didn't have to pay for hotels, there wasn't a lot of travel time, where the I knew people up there that I was going to, it was kind of a fun thing to go to anyway, and kind of basically rather than making about one thing, making it about like, okay, selling a couple of books, meeting a couple of new people, maybe hearing about a couple of new trends in the industry or hearing about a couple of writers I haven't heard before, just sort of like rather than making one big benefit, like lots of sort of small benefits, but for that reason, not to do it too much, right? And that changed maybe a couple years ago when I met a couple of people who just again doing convention sort of that same way where it's sort of like, all right, I have my tiny little slice of the table that I got because I split it with like 5 friends, and it's mostly an excuse for me to hang out with my 5 friends and throw spitballs at each other and maybe sell a couple books. And then did have the good fortune to meet a couple people that were actually like, I could kind of, I saw people wandering over. It's just like, wait a minute, I think those people are actually sort of making money, and that to sort of talk to those people about how they do it and figure out, okay, there's a way here, whereas maybe I thought there wasn't a way before. And I was just sort of getting to the point where it's like, okay, maybe this is something that I need to work on, not just to do it more often, because magically I'm going to make more money if I do it more often, but maybe I need to invest money and time in this. Maybe I need to make my table look a lot nicer. Maybe I need to make sure that this is something I'm doing regularly so that I can kind of improve the skills involved. And maybe getting it to the point where instead of thinking, okay, this doesn't work so good, I should do less of it, maybe thinking of this in terms of, okay, this is something that doesn't work so good, I should do more of it to make it work better, because there is actually something I can reach here. And yeah, so then about a year and a half ago, like literally the weekend that COVID came down, I was at a steampunk convention, and that I left about halfway through just because I knew this was a terrible idea. I remember like the band playing at the ballroom at the steampunk convention was actually enacting the fall of the Titanic, which I thought for the big weekend that COVID really hit was almost too much, right? It was too close to it. And then I went home, and then I was dealing with very different things for a very long time, and I've only just now decided to get back into doing convention stuff. First big convention that I did was a few weeks ago, and it was just, I had no expectations for it. I just thought it was just like, okay, again, it's cheap to go, and again, I'm going to do this more and more often, mostly so that I can practice and make sure that that I'm good at doing this. So that any information I'm good about, whether I'm selling a lot of books or selling fewer books, I know that it's not just me, that I can sort of figure out what kind of events maybe I want to do just based on that. So I went to a little steampunk street fair called Cogs and Corsets in lovely Bloomington, Illinois. Bloomington, Illinois is a lovely little town. I had not been there before. Well, I think I visited a college there when I was at the college visiting phase of things. So I had not visited there in a very long time, at least. Lovely little spot. The people running the little street fair were just sort of like, yeah, we don't usually have writers do very well here, but you're welcome to give it a shot. And we got a table. It didn't cost too much. So I drove down there, did beautifully, did great. Left with sold many, if that was happening every Saturday, I would just do it every Saturday, right? Made substantially more money than I usually would have made at 3-day conventions just in the course of about 5 hours. So at that point, I was really excited. I was thinking, okay, if this is working here to that extent, surely when I go to one of these big old 3-day conventions again with my sort of new setup, with everything that I have going on here, this is at least, I have some reason for feeling optimistic, right? So this is promising. So I went to Inconjunction this past weekend, and to remit, so the 3 reasons that I've decided to do these conventions more often is, first up, money. Secondly, is to be getting practice, sort of like doing pitching books and sort of knowing how to do it. And then the third 3 is just sort of to be learning and to have information so that I can plan, so that I've done a bunch of different kinds of events and I have the information I need to plan and figure out where to focus and what the best thing is. In terms of money, I took a bath this weekend. Again, the main reason for that, that it's tempting almost just to sort of write the whole thing off, is just because not enough people are comfortable coming out from COVID, post-COVID anymore. So the convention was very, very sparsely attended. Not a lot of people came. There wasn't a lot of people. Wasn't a lot of people to buy books. Cucaracha. That's it. I'm sort of tempted to go. It's almost tempting just to say, okay, there's no people there, so you can't learn anything. I still felt like I learned some stuff. Right? Of the people that were there, and also just sort of walking around, kind of seeing other people's displays and stuff, I felt like my new display, my new table setup, was really good. My books are looking shiny. My posters are looking shiny. The cool bookshelves and stuff that my dad, the woodworker, built for me. All that stuff. Everything looked really nice, and people were responding to it. People were seeing it. Even though, I had the lousy spot in the convention where people sort of really weren't walking by, and there weren't very many people. And even factoring in for all those things, people were perking up a little bit and seeing that. And so that's okay. At least one solid piece of information is, okay, that reinforced what was going on from Bloomington, is that, my situation here looks good. Pat, another thing that I sort of picked up, and I'd been thinking about this before, just at the steampunk convention a year and a half ago, and then also at the steampunk street fair a few weeks ago, is that demographically, let's say anime conventions are younger than me generally, although I'm still going to be trying those. It's going to feel a little creepy, but I'm going to do it. if anime conventions are a little bit younger than me, and some of the things conventions like Inconjunction and WindyCon, I've tended to feel like are a little bit older than me because so many of the people that come there have been coming there for 20, 30 years and just have their own thing going. In a very cool thing that I'd love to talk about later. I think it's a really interesting little subculture, and again, to the extent that I feel tapped into it, it's a neat thing. I like it. But ultimately, it does end up being a little bit older than me, and people sort of have very specific tastes. Sometimes, let's say, I'm sorry, I guess I think that sounded like more of a. I didn't mean that as like a stealth burn or anything. It's just that people kind of know what they like, and if something seems shiny and new, they're not necessarily going to be into it all the time. Whereas the like steampunk side of things, I think, is a little bit more at about my age and interest level, kind of. So I think that focusing on things like that, even though I don't really, I mean, look at me, yeah, I don't look super steampunk. I do not look very dapper exactly, but I think that going for that, or also for younger, and that is definitely where doing some of the big pop culture conventions or the smaller anime conventions and stuff. I'm more likely to do a little bit better, and that I should at least consider the possibility that some of these conventions that have sort of an older demo. Might not be as automatic a hit. So maybe I have to stop and maybe I have to go back to some version of the local thing and just thinking, okay, yeah, you can do those conventions because they're good and you get lots of interesting information about them, and just because you like doing them and because where you see friends there and stuff. But as far as like driving 5 hours out there to stay at a hotel, maybe that's not as good an expense as you can for those. I don't know yet, but at least that's kind of worth thinking about. And what else? What else did I learn? Oh, also, then I also need to learn and work on my pitch a little bit, especially because the way that I had my table set up was one of it was for my kind of like adventure fantasy swashbuckly stories, The Orphan Fleet, which were the ones that were just the main things I was selling at the Steampunk Street Fair, and then the other ones are my Charlie Harmer kind of like noir ghost stories, which are generally skewed for sort of an older crowd. And indeed, of the books that I sold, the majority of them were of Charlie. Even though but I sort of figured out that like one of the big discoveries with the Bloomington convention was that my pitch for the Orphan Fleet actually was pretty good. Now that I had sort of worked on that subconsciously a little bit, and my pitch for Charlie isn't there yet. I had a chance to practice it a little bit, but again, not a lot of people, so not a lot of repetitions, sort of. But at the very least, it's introduced a worm into my head, and I could think about that a little bit more in terms of, okay, how can I sell these books? What's the best way to do it? And I think that that's something that I can get better at. I think that there's a road towards progress there. Yeah, so those are the main. So as far as practice, I got in a little bit. As far as learning, I got a little bit there. As far as money, I took a bath. All right, I cannot afford to take a bath quite this thoroughly, quite that often. And yet I'm in a good mood, mostly because again I do like these small fan-driven conventions with lots of history. I think they're cool things. And also the thing that brought me sort of back to Inconjunction, I did Inconjunction a couple of times when I was doing my sticking against the wall thing, with only a little bit of success both times. But the reason I went back for the second time is, geez, people are nice. Geez, people are cool. Just the community that they got going on down there, really impressed me that way of just sort of being really supportive and nice, and even just sort of sitting at my table and with all the other the people that are feeling like, geez, we're not selling anything, this convention isn't going great, and just sort of like throwing, metaphorical and actual spitballs at each other and just sort of goofing off and being silly. It was nice, and I even ran into some people that I only would have known me for 3 or 4 years ago, and they all just saw me, and it was just like it was like Cheers. It was a fun time. So yeah, I guess that deserves to sort of be factored into that. Really, if I want to give Inconjunction kind of every shot that I has, because again, even though I just lost a ton of money this past weekend, I really did feel like I had a good time, and I enjoyed it, and would like to go back somehow. So that's something that's worth thinking about. And along those lines, check it out. I got some books. So first up, I got this here book. This is put out by the Vincennes Writers Group, and the reason that I grabbed this guy is first off because it's this is it's just a standard little group of little book of short stories done by a local writers group, which really remind me of Twilight Tales and some of the anthologies that I've gotten into or that friends of mine have gotten into. So that kind of thing is really sort of into my heart. I love the sort of aesthetic from these places. And two of the people that got stories in here, and I'm going to make absolutely sure I get the names right, are Annie Riggs and Molly Daniels, who both had tables on me, and who are my, again, verbal and sometimes physical sparring partners over the weekend. We were all just sort of bouncing around, being very silly, and it was awfully fun hanging out with those guys, and I really enjoyed it. So I kind of wanted to read their work, and this will let me read a couple short stories of theirs, and is very happy. I also grabbed, check it out, The Life and Death of Erica Flynn by Sarah Marion. All right, and this one is from a local press called Per Bastet. They had a pretty big presence at the convention. They had tons of books, more than I could really afford to buy. But I grabbed this one in particular because I did meet Sarah, and Sarah's very cool. But also because it's a portal fantasy about the afterlife, which is a particular subgenre that I kind of enjoy. And spoiler alert for future Charlie things, I might get into that territory at least a little bit sometimes, where it's someone dies and then they find that the afterlife is more colorful and interesting than they might have thought. And that's catnip for me. I like that. So I'm looking sort of seeing how this happens. And I'd encourage everybody to go check out any other of Per Bastet's books that they like. And then last one is, look at this cover. This is real nice. Okay. And also the book that I might have bought, this book was thicker and more expensive, the Lethal Red Riding Hood. And I didn't quite grab it just because, again, as I've reiterated several times, I lost myself a lot of money this weekend, because my little adventure wasn't that big success. But I had to buy at least one thing from this press, which is Lost in the Woods Press, based out of Conway, Arkansas, just because, geez, they have beautiful... Because I'm hoping that the books will be good, but the people are real nice, and geez, they really have these beautiful book covers, and I just kind of like look at that, it's like that's very shiny, and I want to have that. So now I have. Okay. And all right, I'm just going to cut it off right there. Thank you so much for listening to me. There's going to be some more videos coming down the pike. If you want any particular topics for me to explore or talk about, comment, let me know. Also down there, you can join my mailing list. Go click on the links. You can go buy my books, like, subscribe, all that stuff. And I'm going to be back in touch with you guys soon. And I've been brewing some things up. There's going to be lots of things going on. So watch this space because I'm really excited. And thanks as always for paying attention to me and all my weird stuff. And I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.